This is my true story. Every Monday evening for 8 months, my wife took our 7-year-old son to guitar lessons across town. I would stay home preparing dinner and wait for them to return. I was excited to hear about his progress and asked to see what he learned each week. But he always said, "Not yet, Dad," with a sadness in his eyes I could not understand. Last Monday, I discovered something that shattered my world. Those guitar lessons never existed. What my wife was really doing destroyed everything I believed about my family. Before I tell you what happened, tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. Every Monday evening for 8 months, my wife would announce it was time for our son's guitar lesson. She would gather his backpack and his jacket and tell him to get ready. I would watch them leave together through the front door. She said the music school was across town about 30 minutes away. She said the lessons lasted an hour. They would be gone for about 2.5 hours total by the time they drove there and back. I never questioned this routine because I had no reason to doubt my wife. I would stay home during these Monday evenings and prepare dinner for when they returned. I liked having that time to cook something special for my family. I would make my son's favorite meals and have everything ready when they walked through the door. I looked forward to hearing about his progress with the guitar. I imagined him learning chords and playing songs. I was proud that my son was learning music and developing a skill that would stay with him for life. Every week when they came home, I would ask my son to show me what he learned. I would ask him to play a chord or tell me about the songs his teacher was teaching him. But he never wanted to show me anything. He would always say, "Not yet, Dad." He would say he was not ready to perform yet. He would say he needed more practice before he could play for me. His excuses seemed reasonable at the time. I thought he was just shy or nervous about performing. But there was something in his eyes that bothered me, even though I could not identify what it was. When I asked about his lessons, he would look sad. His expression would change from the happy child he normally was to someone carrying a weight. There was a sadness and a heaviness that did not make sense. Learning guitar should have made him excited, not sad. But I dismissed my concerns, thinking maybe he was just tired from the lesson or frustrated with learning something difficult. I trusted my wife completely because she was my partner. We had been married for 9 years. She was the mother of my child. We had built a life together and raised our son together. I had no reason to suspect she would lie to me about something as simple as guitar lessons. I believed everything she told me about where they were going and what they were doing. Trust was the foundation of our marriage, and I never imagined she would betray that trust. My wife would come home from these Monday lessons and tell me about how well our son was doing. She would say the teacher was pleased with his progress. She would say he was learning quickly and had natural talent. She would make up details about scales he was practicing and songs he was working on. I believed every word she said. I would smile and tell her I was proud of our son. I would tell her I could not wait to hear him play when he was ready. I never thought to verify any of this information. Why would I? She was my wife and the mother of my child. Normal people do not lie about taking their child to music lessons. Normal people do not create elaborate false stories about guitar teachers and practice sessions. I assumed she was telling the truth because that is what spouses do. They tell each other the truth about basic everyday things, like where they are taking their child. Looking back now, I can see signs I missed. My son never talked enthusiastically about his lessons. He never mentioned his teacher's name or talked about other students. He never hummed melodies or tried to practice at home. There was no guitar in our house. When I asked my wife about getting him a guitar to practice, she always said the teacher recommended waiting until he was more advanced. She had an answer for everything. She had created a complete story with details and explanations that covered every question I might ask. For 8 months, this routine continued every Monday without fail. For 8 months, I trusted that my wife was taking our son to learn music. For 8 months, I stayed home cooking dinner and waiting for them to return. I never suspected that every Monday evening, my wife was taking our son somewhere else entirely. I never imagined she was using those 2.5 hours to destroy our family from the inside. Last Monday, something different happened that would expose everything. My son and my wife came home from the guitar lesson like they always did. My son seemed tired and went straight to his room. My wife said he had worked hard during the lesson and needed rest. I was in the kitchen finishing dinner preparations. Everything seemed normal, but then I realized my son had left his backpack in the car. He usually brought it inside immediately. I went out to the car to get it for him. I opened the backseat door and grabbed the small blue backpack he took to his lessons every week. The backpack felt light, too light. I had assumed it was filled with guitar books and sheet music and whatever materials he needed for his lessons. But carrying it inside, I realized there was almost nothing in it. My curiosity was triggered. I set the backpack on the kitchen counter and opened it to see what was inside. What I found made no sense. The backpack contained coloring books and crayons. There were small toys and action figures. There were snacks and juice boxes. There was absolutely nothing related to guitar lessons. No music books. No sheet music. No practice assignments. Nothing that a child would take to a music lesson. Just items you would bring to keep a young child entertained somewhere. The contents looked like what you would pack for a child going to a park or a waiting room, not to a structured music lesson. I stared at the contents, confused and feeling the first stirrings of concern. Why would my son need coloring books at a guitar lesson? Why would he need toys and snacks? Something was wrong. Something did not add up. I called my wife into the kitchen and showed her the backpack. I asked her why there were no guitar materials inside. Why was he taking coloring books to music lessons? Her face changed when she saw what I had found. She looked nervous and caught off guard. She stammered and said the teacher provides everything. She said the music school has all the books and materials there. She said our son does not need to bring anything except himself. She said the other items in the backpack were just in case he needed entertainment before or after the lesson. Her explanations came quickly, but they sounded rehearsed and false. She was making excuses on the spot. I could see in her eyes that she was lying, but I did not yet understand what she was lying about. Something felt deeply wrong. My instincts were screaming that I was being deceived. I told my wife I wanted to call the music school and check on our son's progress. I said I wanted to speak to his teacher and ask how he was doing. I wanted to schedule a time to watch one of his lessons. My wife's face went pale. She tried to discourage me. She said the teacher was very busy and did not like parents interfering. She said I should just trust that everything was fine, but her reaction made me more suspicious. I asked my wife for the name and phone number of the music school. She hesitated and then gave me a name she had mentioned before. I looked up the number online and called while she stood there watching me nervously. When someone answered, I asked about my son's guitar lessons. I gave his name and said he had been taking lessons every Monday evening for 8 months. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then the person said they had no record of my son ever being enrolled at their school. They said they did not offer lessons on Monday evenings. They said no child by that name had ever been a student there. I felt my stomach drop as I processed what I was hearing. The music school my wife had named did not have my son enrolled. There were no Monday lessons. There had never been any guitar lessons. My wife had been lying to me for 8 months about where she was taking our son every Monday evening. I looked at her standing in the kitchen and saw guilt and panic on her face. I asked her where she had really been taking our son. She started crying, and that is when I knew our marriage and our family were about to fall apart. I did not confront my wife immediately after discovering the music school lie. She was crying and making excuses, but I told her I needed time to think. I could not process what was happening. My mind was racing with possibilities about where she had been taking our son every Monday for 8 months. Nothing innocent made sense. If she was really taking him somewhere harmless, why would she lie about it? Why would she create an elaborate story about guitar lessons? My gut told me something terrible was happening. I decided I needed concrete evidence before confronting her fully. I needed to know exactly where she was taking our son and what she was doing during those Monday evenings. I could not rely on her to tell me the truth. She had already proven she was willing to lie to my face for months. So the next morning, I hired a private investigator. I found someone who specialized in following people and documenting their activities. I explained the situation and asked him to follow my wife and son the following Monday. The days leading up to that Monday were torture. I went through the motions of normal life while my heart pounded with dread about what the investigator might find. I imagined worst-case scenarios. Was she taking our son to meet another man? Was she involved in something illegal? Was our son in danger? I could barely sleep. I could barely eat. My wife acted normal around me, pretending nothing had happened. She did not know I had hired someone to follow her. She thought she had convinced me with her weak excuses about the music school. Monday finally arrived. My wife announced as usual that it was time for our son's guitar lesson. I watched them leave together just like I had dozens of times before. But this time, I knew someone was following them. This time, I would finally learn the truth. I stayed home like I always did, but I could not focus on anything. I paced around the house, checking my phone every few minutes, waiting for the investigator to contact me. The wait felt endless. The investigator called me about an hour after they left. He said he had followed my wife's car and documented where she went. He said he had taken photographs. He asked if I wanted him to email the report immediately or wait until I could meet in person. I said send everything now. I could not wait. I needed to know. He said he would send the photos and a detailed report within minutes. I sat at my kitchen table staring at my phone, waiting for the email to arrive. When the email came, I opened it with shaking hands. The report contained photographs that destroyed my world completely. The first photo showed my wife's car parked at a public park across town. The second photo showed my wife and my son getting out of the car. The third photo showed them walking toward a bench where a well-dressed man was waiting. The fourth photo showed the three of them sitting together on the bench. The man was holding my son's hand. My wife was smiling at them both. I stared at the photos in disbelief. There was no guitar. There was no music school. There was no lesson. There was just my wife and my son meeting a stranger at a park. The man in the photos looked to be in his 40s. He was wearing expensive clothes and looked successful. I had never seen him before in my life. I had no idea who he was or why my wife was bringing our son to meet him in secret every Monday for 8 months. The investigator's report said they sat on the bench together for about an hour. They talked, and the man gave my son what appeared to be gifts. My wife and the man seemed comfortable with each other, like they knew each other well. After an hour, they walked back to the cars, and my wife drove away. The man got into a luxury sedan and left in the opposite direction. The report included the man's license plate number and a note that the investigator could research his identity if I wanted. I sat at the kitchen table staring at photos of my family with a stranger. My hands were shaking. My vision was blurred with tears. I knew in that moment that my marriage was over. Whatever my wife was doing was a betrayal so deep it could never be forgiven. I just needed to confront her and make her tell me the truth. I waited for my wife and son to come home that Monday evening. I sat at the kitchen table with the investigator's photos printed out and spread across the surface. I did not prepare dinner like I usually did. I just sat there staring at the images of my wife and my son with a stranger. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. I was about to confront my wife with evidence she could not deny or explain away. I was about to learn a truth that I knew would destroy everything. They came home around 7:30 like always. My son went to his room immediately. My wife came into the kitchen and saw me sitting at the table with the photos. Her face went white. She froze in the doorway, staring at the evidence of her lies spread out in front of her. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I said, "Sit down." My voice was cold and hard. I said, "You need to tell me the truth right now." I said, "Who is that man, and why have you been taking our son to meet him every Monday for 8 months? She started crying immediately. She sat down across from me and put her face in her hands. She sobbed for several minutes before she could speak. I waited. I did not comfort her. I just waited for her to find the words to explain what she had done. Finally, she looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. She said, "I am so sorry." She said she never meant for things to go this far. She said she made terrible mistakes and did not know how to fix them. But she was stalling. She was not answering my question. I said, "Who is he?" I pointed at the photos. I said, "Tell me who that man is right now, or I am calling a lawyer tonight." The threat broke through her deflection. She took a shaking breath and said the words that shattered my entire world. She said, "He is our son's biological father." She said she had an affair 9 years ago. She said the man in the photos was someone she used to work with. She said when she got pregnant, She was not sure who the father was, but she chose to stay with me and raise the baby as ours. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. I could not breathe. I stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. Our son was not mine biologically. The child I had raised for 7 years was another man's child. The boy I loved and cared for and worked 2 jobs to support was not my biological son. Everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. My wife had been lying to me for 9 years. She had let me believe I was the father when she knew there was a chance I was not. I asked when she found out for certain. She said she always suspected but never wanted to know for sure. She said a year ago the biological father contacted her. He said he had been thinking about the timing and realized there was a possibility the child was his. He wanted a DNA test. My wife agreed, and the test confirmed he was the biological father. She said she did not tell me because she did not want to hurt me. She said she thought she could keep it secret forever. But the biological father wanted to meet his son. She said he pressured her to let him be part of our son's life. He said he had a right to know his child. My wife said she felt guilty and confused. She said she agreed to let him meet our son but did not know how to tell me. So she created the lie about guitar lessons. Every Monday for 8 months, she had been taking our son to the park to spend time with his biological father. She had been facilitating a relationship between them behind my back while lying to me about where they were going. I asked if our son knew. She nodded, and more tears fell. She said yes, he knows. She said she told him the truth about who his real father is. She said she thought he deserved to know. But she did not stop there. She admitted something even worse. She said she had been telling our son during these meetings that I was not his real dad. She said she told him he should start thinking of the other man as his actual father. She said she poisoned my son's mind against me for 8 months. Through tears, my wife admitted what she had been telling our son during those Monday meetings at the park. She said she told him that I was not his real father. She said she explained that the man at the park was his biological dad, and that biology mattered. She said she told our son that the other man was his actual daddy, and that he should start forming a bond with him. She had been systematically working to transfer my son's love and loyalty from me to a stranger. She had been destroying the father-son relationship I had built over 7 years. But the betrayal went even deeper than just revealing biological truth. My wife admitted she had been talking badly about me to our son during these secret meetings. She said she told him I was poor compared to his real father. She said she pointed out that we lived in a small house while his biological father lived in a mansion. She said she told him we drove an old car while his real father drove luxury vehicles. She was using our financial situation against me to make our son see me as inferior to the other man. She admitted she called me a loser to our son. She said she told him that I had failed in business and that proved I was not successful or capable. She said she explained that his real father was wealthy and accomplished while I was struggling and unsuccessful. She turned my business failure into evidence that I was not worthy of being our son's father figure. She weaponized the hardest period of my life against me to poison my child's view of me. The cruelty of it was staggering. My business had failed 2 years ago during the recession. I had owned a small construction company that went under when the economy collapsed and projects dried up. I lost everything I had built. We had to downsize our home and our lifestyle. I went from being a business owner to working 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. I worked as a warehouse supervisor during the day and drove for a delivery service at night. I was exhausted all the time, but I never stopped providing for my family. I never abandoned my responsibilities. I worked harder than I ever had to make sure we were okay. But my wife took that struggle and used it to convince our son that I was worthless. She told him that real fathers are successful and make money. She told him that I was an embarrassment because we were not wealthy. She told him he should not respect me or look up to me because I had failed at business. She instructed him never to see me as his superhero or his idol. She said he should reserve that admiration for his biological father, who had money and status and all the things I could not provide after my company collapsed. She admitted she told our son that his real father was better than me in every way. She said the biological father had a big house with a pool, She said he drove expensive cars and took vacations to exotic places. She said he was important and successful, while I was just someone who worked low-level jobs. She painted a picture where I was the poor substitute father who had raised him out of ignorance, while his real father was this wonderful, successful man who wanted to be part of his life now. My wife said she told our son that he deserved to know his real father and have a relationship with him. She said she encouraged him to open his heart to the biological father. She said she told him it was okay to love both of us, but that he should understand who his actual dad was. She said biology mattered and blood was important. She undermined everything I had done as a father by reducing it to just being the man who happened to be there while his real father was somewhere else. The psychological damage she inflicted on our 7-year-old son was immense. She burdened him with secrets and divided loyalties. She made him question his identity and his family. She poisoned his view of the man who had raised him and loved him and worked himself to exhaustion for him. She did all of this while smiling at me and pretending everything was normal. She came home from these meetings and lied to my face about guitar lessons while she was actively working to destroy my relationship with my son. My son had been carrying this terrible secret for 8 months. He was only 7 years old, and his mother had burdened him with knowledge that no child should have to process. She told him the man who raised him was not his real father. She told him there was another man who was his biological dad. She told him to keep this information hidden from me. She made him complicit in her deception. She forced him to lie to me every time I asked about guitar lessons. She turned my child into a participant in her betrayal. I understood now why his eyes held such sadness when I asked about his lessons. He was not sad about learning guitar. He was sad because he was being forced to deceive the father who loved him. Every Monday when they came home, I would ask excited questions about what he learned. He would have to look at me and lie. He would have to say, "Not yet, Dad," when I asked to see him play. He would have to pretend the guitar lessons were real when he knew they were not. The weight of that deception must have been crushing for a 7-year-old child. He had been told that his dad was not really his dad, that the man who tucked him in at night and read him stories and took care of him when he was sick was not his actual father, that there was another man out there who was his real daddy because of biology. My wife had shattered his sense of security and identity. She had made him question the foundation of his family. She had introduced doubt and confusion into a child's mind that should have been filled with certainty and love. She had also told him that I was a loser, not worth respecting. She told him I was poor and had failed at business. She told him his real father was successful and wealthy while I was struggling and embarrassing. My son had to process the information that the man raising him was inferior to this stranger he was meeting at the park. He had to reconcile his love for me with his mother's words, telling him I was not good enough. He was being taught to transfer his affection and admiration from me to another man. No wonder he looked sad and conflicted. He was being pulled in 2 directions by his mother's manipulation. She was telling him to keep secrets from me. She was telling him to start loving another man as his father. She was telling him I was not worthy of his respect, but he had 7 years of memories with me. 7 years of me being his dad in every way that mattered. 7 years of love and care and presence. He could not just erase that because his mother said someone else was his biological father. My son had been protecting me from a truth his mother forced him to carry. Every time he said "not yet, Dad" when I asked about guitar, he was protecting me from learning about the meetings at the park. Every time he stayed quiet about what really happened on Mondays, he was shielding me from the knowledge that would destroy our family. A 7-year-old child was carrying the burden of protecting his father from his mother's lies. That is a responsibility no child should ever have to bear. That is a cruelty that should never have been inflicted on him. I thought about all the Monday evenings when he came home looking tired and sad. I had assumed he was just exhausted from his lesson. I had no idea he was exhausted from the emotional weight of deception and divided loyalties. I had no idea he was struggling with questions about his identity and his family. I had no idea his mother was systematically working to destroy his bond with me by introducing another man as his real father and portraying me as a failure. My heart broke for my son who had been caught in the middle of his mother's betrayal. He did not ask for any of this. He did not ask to learn that his biology was different than he thought. He did not ask to meet a stranger and be told that man was his real father. He did not ask to keep secrets or tell lies or choose between the father who raised him and the father his mother said was better. He was an innocent child whose mother had used him as a weapon against me while destroying his sense of security and family in the process. My wife had used my business failure from 2 years ago as ammunition to destroy my relationship with my son. She had taken the lowest point of my life and weaponized it against me. She told our son that my failure proved I was worthless and not deserving of being his father figure. She turned my economic struggles into evidence that I was inferior to the biological father who had money and success. She reduced my value as a father to the size of my bank account and the status of my career. She convinced our son that fathers are measured by their financial success rather than their love and dedication. Yes, I had lost my construction company during the recession. The economy collapsed, and construction projects disappeared overnight. I had clients cancel contracts. I had suppliers demanding payment. I had employees I could no longer afford to keep. I watched everything I had built over a decade fall apart in a matter of months. I tried everything to save the company, but the economic forces were too strong. I eventually had to declare bankruptcy and close the business. It was the most painful experience of my professional life. The failure devastated me financially and emotionally. I lost my savings. I lost my reputation in the industry. I lost my identity as a business owner. We had to sell our nice house and move to a smaller rental. We had to get rid of our second car. We had to cut expenses everywhere we could. My wife was angry about the downsizing. She resented having to give up the lifestyle we had built. She blamed me for the failure, even though the recession affected thousands of businesses. She never understood or appreciated the effort I made to save the company before it collapsed. But I never stopped providing for my family despite the business failure. I immediately found work doing whatever I could to bring in income. I took a job as a warehouse supervisor working 40 hours a week. The pay was less than I had made as a business owner, but it was steady and reliable. I also started driving for a delivery service in the evenings and on weekends. I worked constantly to make sure we had enough money for rent and food and basic needs. I was exhausted all the time, but I never complained because my family needed me. I worked 2 jobs for 2 years to keep our family stable. I would wake up at 5 in the morning to get to the warehouse. I would work until 3 in the afternoon. Then I would drive deliveries until 10 at night. On weekends, I would work both jobs back to back. I barely slept. I barely had time to eat. But I made sure my wife and my son had what they needed. I made sure the bills were paid and there was food on the table. I sacrificed my health and my rest to fulfill my responsibilities as a husband and father. My bank account had shrunk drastically after the business failure, but my devotion to my family never wavered. I loved my son just as much when I was driving a delivery truck as I had when I owned a construction company. I showed up for him every day. I played with him when I had energy. I helped with his homework. I read him bedtime stories. I was present and involved despite working constantly. My financial situation changed, but my commitment to being a good father did not change at all. Yet my wife took my hardest struggle and used it to justify her betrayal. She told our son that I was a loser because my business failed. She told him that successful men do not fail the way I did. She told him that his biological father was better than me because he had money and I did not. She ignored every hour I worked to support them. She ignored every sacrifice I made. She ignored my devotion and my love. She reduced my worth as a father to my financial status and told our son I was not good enough. The cruelty of using my business failure against me was profound. She weaponized my hardship. She turned my economic struggle into proof that I was worthless. She convinced our son that money and status determine a father's value. She taught him that the man who worked 2 jobs to provide for him was inferior to a stranger with a bigger house. She destroyed my relationship with my son, using my own pain as the weapon. And she did it all while I was working myself to exhaustion trying to take care of them. After my wife's confession, I demanded to know everything about the biological father. I needed to understand who this man was and what role he had played in destroying my family. My wife told me his name and explained their history. He was her former boss from 9 years ago when she worked at a corporate office. They had an affair that lasted several months. When my wife discovered she was pregnant, she ended the affair and chose to stay with me. She claimed she did not know at the time whether I or her boss was the father, but she decided to raise the baby as ours regardless. The biological father had moved on with his life after the affair ended. He got married to someone else and started his own family. He had 2 children with his wife and lived in a wealthy suburb. He was successful in business and made a lot of money. He had everything that I had lost when my construction company failed. He had the big house and the expensive cars and the financial security. He represented everything my wife wished I still had and everything she had been telling our son I lacked. About a year ago, the biological father contacted my wife out of nowhere. He said he had been thinking about the timing of their affair and when my son was born. He said he realized there was a possibility the child could be his. He wanted a DNA test to know for certain. My wife agreed to the test without telling me anything about it. The results came back confirming he was the biological father. Instead of telling me the truth, my wife kept it secret and began this entire deception. The biological father said he wanted to be part of his son's life. He said he had a right to know his child. He pressured my wife to arrange meetings. My wife felt guilty about keeping a father from his biological child, so she agreed. But she did not want to tell me the truth because she knew it would destroy our marriage. So she created the lie about guitar lessons and started taking our son to meet this man every Monday at the park. She facilitated a secret relationship while lying to me for 8 months. The biological father had been telling my son about his big house during these meetings. He talked about the pool in his backyard and the game room he had. He talked about his expensive cars and the vacations his family took. He showed my son photographs of his house and his life. He painted a picture of wealth and luxury that was completely opposite to our modest circumstances. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was using his money to win over a child who had been taught by his mother that money equals worth. My wife said the biological father agreed to these secret meetings because she had convinced him that our son deserved to know his real father. She fed his ego by telling him he was the real dad and that biology mattered most. She made him feel important and needed. He liked the idea of being the successful biological father who swoops in to rescue his child from a poor, struggling substitute father. He liked being the hero in this story, while I was painted as the failure who had been raising his child out of ignorance. The biological father was married with his own family, but his wife knew nothing about my son. He was conducting these meetings secretly from his own wife. He was lying to his wife about where he was going on Monday evenings, just like my wife was lying to me. The entire situation was built on layers of deception. 2 families being lied to so that this man could have a relationship with a child he had ignored for 7 years until it suddenly suited him to be involved. He had not been there when my son was born. He had not been there for the sleepless nights and the diaper changes and the first steps. He had not been there for the tantrums and the illnesses and the hard parts of raising a child. He had lived his comfortable life with his other family while I raised his biological son. And now he wanted to waltz in and claim fatherhood based on DNA while undermining everything I had done. He was using his wealth to buy my son's affection while my wife helped him do it. I filed for divorce the next day. I could not stay married to someone who had betrayed me so completely. She had lied about our son's paternity for 9 years. She had facilitated secret meetings between our son and his biological father behind my back. She had poisoned my son's mind against me by calling me a loser and telling him to transfer his love to another man. She had used my business failure as a weapon to destroy my relationship with my child. The marriage was over. There was no coming back from this level of betrayal and deception. I also knew I had to fight for custody of my son. He was not my biological child, but he was my son in every way that mattered. I had raised him from birth. I had been there for every milestone and every moment. I had loved him and cared for him and worked myself to exhaustion to provide for him. Biology did not change the fact that I was his father. I was not going to let my wife or the biological father take him away from me. I was going to fight with everything I had to keep my son. I hired a lawyer who specialized in family law and custody cases. I explained the entire situation, including the DNA test results that proved I was not the biological father. My lawyer said I still had a strong case for custody. I had been the child's legal father for 7 years. I had acted as his parent in every way. The law recognized something called psychological parentage, which meant the parent-child bond I had built over 7 years was legally significant regardless of biology. I had rights as the father who raised him, even if I was not the biological father. We ordered an official DNA test through the court to confirm what we already knew. The test results showed I was not my son's biological father. But my lawyer argued that this did not diminish my role as his dad. I had been his father for his entire conscious life. I was the one he called dad. I was the one who had been present and involved. The biological father had been absent until a year ago when it suddenly became convenient for him to be involved. My lawyer said family courts prioritize the best interests of the child, and that usually meant stability and continuity with the parent who raised them. The court ordered a psychological evaluation of everyone involved, including my wife and the biological father and me, and most importantly, my son. A psychologist spent weeks interviewing all of us and observing interactions. The psychologist's report was damning for my wife. It detailed how she had manipulated our son and burdened him with secrets. It described the psychological harm of telling a 7-year-old child that the man raising him was not his real father and was inferior to another man. It documented the confusion and divided loyalty my son experienced. The psychologist recommended that I be awarded primary custody. The report said my son needed stability and continuity with the father figure he had known his entire life. It said removing him from my care would cause additional trauma on top of what he had already experienced. It said my wife's manipulation and deception showed poor judgment and made her a less suitable primary custodian. The report acknowledged the biological father's legal rights but recommended limited and supervised introduction of that relationship over time rather than the secret meetings that had been happening. The judge reviewed all the evidence, including the DNA test and the psychological evaluation and the testimony from everyone involved. The judge was clearly horrified by what my wife had done. The judge said in open court that using a child as a pawn in adult deception was unacceptable. The judge said poisoning a child's relationship with the man who raised him was cruel and damaging. The judge said facilitating secret meetings and telling a 7-year-old to keep major secrets was psychologically harmful. The judge awarded me primary physical custody of my son. My wife was given visitation rights, but they were restricted. She could see our son on weekends, but the visits had to be supervised initially. The judge ordered that she complete parenting classes and therapy before unsupervised visits would be allowed. The biological father was given the right to seek visitation, but it had to be introduced slowly and with therapeutic support. The judge made clear that my role as the father who raised my son was legally recognized and protected, despite the lack of biological connection. My son lives with me now in the same modest house we lived in before everything fell apart. He has his own room with his toys and his books. He goes to the same school and has the same friends. I kept everything as stable and normal as possible for him during this traumatic time. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago, and we are slowly finding our rhythm as just the two of us. It has not been easy, but we are rebuilding what my wife nearly destroyed with her lies and manipulation. We are slowly undoing the damage of 8 months of poison that my wife planted in his mind. I talk to him every day about what it means to be a father. I tell him that being a dad is not about biology or DNA. I explain that fatherhood is about love and presence and sacrifice. I tell him that the man who shows up every day and takes care of you and loves you is your real father, regardless of genetics. I tell him that blood does not make a family. Commitment and devotion make a family. I tell him every day that I am his dad and I always will be. I tell him that nothing can change the 7 years we have spent together. I tell him that I was there when he was born and I held him when he was a baby and I taught him to walk and to talk. I tell him that I have been there for every scraped knee and every nightmare and every happy moment. I tell him that those years together made me his father in every way that matters. I tell him that I will always be his dad, no matter what anyone else says. I address the lies his mother told him directly. I tell him that my business failed, but that does not make me a loser. I explain that many businesses failed during the recession and that economic hardship does not define a person's worth. I tell him that I have worked 2 jobs for years to provide for him and that hard work and dedication matter more than wealth. I tell him that being poor does not make someone worthless and being rich does not make someone valuable. I teach him that character matters more than bank accounts. I tell him that real fathers are measured by devotion, not by dollars. I explain that the biological father was not there for the first 7 years of his life. He was not there for the hard parts of raising a child. He showed up later with money and gifts trying to buy affection. But that is not what makes someone a father. Being a father means showing up every single day, even when it is hard. It means working when you are exhausted. It means sacrificing what you want so your child can have what they need. That is what I have done for 7 years. Yes, my business failed. Yes, we are not wealthy. Yes, we live in a small house and drive an old car. But I have been there for every moment that actually mattered. I was there when he had his first fever, and I stayed up all night to make sure he was okay. I was there for his first day of school, and I walked him to his classroom. I was there for every bedtime story and every scraped knee and every time he needed his dad. I have been present and involved and loving. That is what makes me his father. Not biology, not money, not status, just love and commitment. There were never any guitar lessons. There was never any music school. There were only lies disguised as lessons. My wife used those fake guitar lessons as cover for secret meetings that nearly destroyed my relationship with my son. But we are learning a different lesson now together. We are learning that real fathers are not defined by DNA or by wealth. We are learning that family is built on love and trust and showing up every single day. We are learning that the bond between a father and son cannot be broken by lies or by biology or by another man's money. My son still has moments where he is confused and sad about everything that happened. He still asks questions about his biological father and why his mother lied. We work through these feelings together with the help of a therapist. But every day he seems a little more secure and a little more certain about who his real dad is. Every day the damage his mother caused heals a little more. We are rebuilding our relationship on truth instead of lies, and we are both learning that being a father is about devotion, not DNA or dollars.